Welcome to another episode of Is It Finally Worth Playing? A series where I review games with troubled launches after months or years of patches, updates, and price drops. Here we're going to be taking a look at the updates. Evil West received its last update December 21st, 2022, adding in the Invincible set as a reward for players who complete the entire game in True Death mode, along with some minor bug fixes. Now with that out of the way, as always, for full transparency, I'm going to start with the bad. Sadly, none of this game's updates have addressed any of its biggest flaws. On top of being altogether poorly optimized, this game also has a frame pacing issue that noticeably affects the gameplay in quality mode. This means the game can appear to stutter when in motion alongside consistent screen tearing and pop-in. Now all these technical issues are present in both modes, so you're forced to choose between a washed out, blurry but smoother 60 FPS or a stuttery but more visually defined 30 FPS. Despite looking considerably worse, I still recommend playing on performance mode over quality mode. The frame stutters are apparent in both, but far more noticeable and consistent at 30 FPS here. What makes this even worse is the pixel count shows a 1728p resolution on both the PlayStation 5 and Series X instead of a 2160p resolution, so it's not exactly 4K, but the performance mode does clock in at 1080p as promised. I expected more from a cross-gen title that clearly is not that visually demanding. I also had issues with a lot of the dialogue randomly dropping in volume and sounding muffled or distorted throughout the entire game. Multiple NPCs had highly inconsistent volume levels that were present even in cutscenes, so I highly recommend playing this with subtitles.
Jess, we won't make it to Calico like this! Watch out for the fat boy! Holy shit! What is that thing?
Evil West's menu settings further compound with this issue as they're lacking in almost every way possible. Evil West doesn't have audio output selection settings, no HDR adjustments, and you have to quit the game to change between quality and performance mode. There's also no option to manually save, and motion blur can't be disabled either. The story here is very poorly constructed. You're thrust right into the middle of a conflict with no real lead up or backstory for anything. There is so little explained about Jesse or the setting. Even after reading the lore, it all still felt very underdeveloped and thrown together. This game desperately needed quality character development and world building. It honestly felt like a sequel at times because so little was explained about almost every character and location. There's still a painfully average story here, but it's clearly missing a proper introduction, and that greatly undermines any sense of connection to any of it. Now this game also offers a co-op mode that is somehow even more broken and restrictive than the main game. Me and my brother ran into numerous technical issues and glitches that range from minor annoyances such as the audio dropping in and out to game-breaking bugs that halted our progression entirely, forcing us to restart the session. On top of all this, you cannot change the difficulty level for co-op, you can only play with people from your friends list, and only the session host can progress their save file while playing in co-op. This goes for both story and character progression. The second player is automatically adjusted to match the mission, and their progress is lost when the session ends. From my experience, they're also more likely to encounter the vast majority of bugs and glitches associated with co-op. And lastly, the gameplay feels great, but the level and game design are overly simplistic and severely outdated when compared to other modern titles. This is one of the few games to where I feel like it's actually impossible to miss anything, because the vast majority of this game is a very linear and straightforward experience with easy but repetitive puzzles and heavily scripted platforming to break up the monotony of combat. I feel like the simplicity of the level design is highlighted by this game's lack of a map or any type of navigation system. Now once you get later into the game's larger, more open levels, this does become a slight problem because it's very easy to get lost or lose track of the objective. And even though the combat system here is great, the enemy encounters and boss battles all still become very repetitive very quickly. The heavily recycled mini-bosses and an overall lack of enemy variety are the main cause of this, as you're tasked with doing the exact same set of attack sequences over and over again as enemies in the background attack you. The game design for the bosses and the mini-bosses was severely lacking as well. So many encounters played out exactly the same way. This game increases its difficulty by throwing waves and waves of enemies at you, along with multiple mini-bosses. The problem with this is a lot of the enemies and the mini-bosses are all considerably durable. This for me created an experience that was more annoying than challenging, because the best way for dealing with these sections was spamming dodge while looping basic attack sequences. The restricted playstyle required for these sections watered down the combat system's variety and quickly became tedious and boring. Instead of adding more moves and phases, the game simply gave the bosses more HP and threw more enemies on screen. Alright, let's talk about some of the things I actually enjoyed about this game. Like I said previously, the combat system here is easily the best thing about this game. There's a solid mixture of range and melee combat, and everything gradually improves the more you play, adding new perks, weapons, and weapon upgrades each chapter. Perks are skills tied directly to your signature Zapper and Gauntlet. They actually give you a decent amount of perks here, along with some flexibility to tailor them to your own specific playstyle by allowing you to refund points between chapters, encouraging blind experimentation. I was also impressed with the amount of weapons available throughout the game and the 3 levels of upgrades available for each weapon. Despite the numerous technical issues I listed previously, I still enjoy playing this in co-op. A competent ally addressed some of my issues with certain sections that required a more restrictive playstyle in single player. I'm going to give this a 5.8. The technical issues, bugs, glitches, level design, and game design were too much for me to overlook and consistently affected my experience with this game. This game reminded me a lot of the Shadow Warrior reboot from the same developer, Flying Wild Hogs, but somehow considerably worse in almost every way possible. Even without the technical issues, this game just feels generic and uninspired. Everything aside from the combat felt like an afterthought. It's hard for me to recommend this game because it's filled with so many issues, and there are far better games that do everything that it's trying to do at a lower price. I got this for free via PlayStation Plus, and honestly, that is the only price I could recommend picking this up at. In closing, I want to say one of the things that surprised me the most about this game is how all of its problems compound with each other. Individually, they seem like things you could possibly overlook, but altogether, it just creates this grueling, nauseating experience. I got about 40% into this game and I just couldn't take it anymore. I really wanted it to be done at that point, but I kept going for you guys to make sure I could complete the game so I could have a full understanding of everything that was offered, so I could give you guys an in-depth review. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll definitely be back with another one. Hey, if you have some suggestions for the next video, please leave them in the comment section. Peace.